welcome to Cookbook Corner. This is a new series we are doing here at Sterling Heights Public Library, where two librarians, my name is Lindsay,
And I'm Brent.
we will be talking about our favorite cookbooks from our cookbook collection. So for this month, we have each selected a book to read through and create one recipe from at home. And Brent, what did you pick this time?
Okay, so I went with Simply Ming One Pot Meals. This is from Ming Tsai. You may be familiar with him. He has had cooking shows on TV for decades. Um, Successful restaurateur, interesting guy. I have been watching this guy for a long time, paid a lot of attention to some of the things that he's done. I really like some of the techniques he uses. He kind of goes pan Asian on a lot of stuff, but he's also very familiar with Western ingredients and techniques. Um, he puts a really interesting spin on stuff. The point to this book was that it was quick, healthy, and affordable recipes using one pot. And from what I've seen with this, trying the recipe that I did, it hits the mark pretty well.
Great. My selection this month is Vegan Africa. I hope to pronounce this name right by Marie Kakuchia. And Marie is a cook who grew up on the Ivory Coast and now lives in Paris. This book originally came out in 2021 in French, but the translated version was released in 2022. If I'm being honest, I was really drawn to the cover and the artwork, but I'm also curious about plant based cooking from around the world. So I chose this one because I was curious to see how it translated into um, different types of African cooking.
Mhm.
And I've also recently had some good experiences at an East African restaurant in downtown Detroit. That restaurant is called Baobab Fare, and I loved it there. So I wanted to see if I could create anything remotely similar to that at home. Okay.
So, did you want to take a moment to talk about the recipe that you picked?
Yes, I would. So it was a little difficult to choose a recipe because everything looks very good and um, I am indecisive. But I ended up going with the sweet potato and kidney bean stew. I was thinking it would make dinners for myself and whoever I care to share it with throughout the week. And I already had most of the ingredients on hand. So this is a very generous portion of stew. It says it serves four, but it made a big old pot. Um, it starts with onion, bell pepper, garlic, and then a list of spices, coriander, cumin, smoked paprika. I left out the regular cayenne pepper. I wanted it to be not spicy because I planned on sharing it with people, and you never know what people's preferences are in that department. And then it does have a little allspice, which I think gives it that more uh, traditional. I think with the coriander and cumin, that could be kind of go like that could be Middle Eastern, that could be Indian or Southeast Asian, but with the allspice that kind of brought it in a new direction from
That's
what I'm used
frequently
to.
used extensively in the Caribbean,
Yes, in the
especially
Caribbean
Jamaica.
too.
Yeah.
And then you've got your sweet potatoes, 2 cans of red kidney beans. It has a tomato base, so you use crushed tomatoes to make up most of the liquid, and then a little coconut sugar. You serve it with cilantro and scallions. So I almost took a selfie when I was making this because cutting up that red onion, it was a very fresh onion, and my knife needs sharpening, so I had the raccoon eyes going on. But then I thought I don't want to record that for posterity, but I did have to leave the room and do some like heavy blinking because it was very potent. But yeah, so you just using coconut oil, which I love. I keep a jar of coconut oil at all times. It's really good for high heat cooking. If you get the refined stuff, it doesn't have the coconut flavor. And it also has a higher smoke point. So I was really happy to get to use some of that. Just put it in my big Dutch oven. And as you're cooking down the peppers and the garlic and onion, once you add the spices, everything just makes this really nice like flavor base. Then you add your sweet potatoes and your beans and all your other liquids and just kind of let it sit and cook. I will say one issue I had, and I think I think this book kind of assumes a base knowledge of cooking. It had you cutting up the sweet potatoes into 1 inch cubes, which are pretty big. But afterwards, it said cook time 30 minutes. I ended up having to cook it for closer to an hour to get everything to cook through. It also recommends to maybe try eating it the next day or in subsequent days, because once you let everything sit and the spices start to bloom and melt together. And I did notice it tasted better the second day. But yeah, I portioned some out, brought some to my parents. I brought some for you today,
I'm interested to
some
try
for
it.
myself. I think in the future, what I would like to add is I think I under seasoned it a little. It could have used a little more salt. And then I think it could use maybe some fresh ginger, and I think some fresh chilies would be really good. Again, if I was just cooking for myself, I don't mind a little bit of heat. So I think if I make it again, I will be tinkering a little bit. But overall, really good basic recipe. It reminded me of a vegan chili that I kind of threw together a few years ago, not working off of a recipe. So of course I forgot how to make it, but that's
Been there,
been there.
boy.
Yeah. So that was my recipe, fully vegan. And if I know you at all, that probably wasn't quite the direction you took with yours. And I'm sure
Oh
everyone would
no.
love to hear. Everyone would love to hear some varieties. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your recipe?
Okay. So real quickly before I get into the recipe itself, I want to just touch on how this book is organized. So it's set up in a very interesting way. It's broken down into techniques first. There are sections for braising, using a wok, sauteing things, roasting. A section that he's got listed as high temp, which is for steaming and frying, and also a soup section and even a toss section, which
Nice.
really isn't so much about cooking. Now, I never made it any farther than the braised section before I picked my recipe. It's cold, you know, um, and I love slow cooked, braised dishes. I only got a few pages in before I ran across a Japanese beef curry, which, if you're a meat and potatoes person, this worked out pretty well. Now, I was not all that familiar with the concept of Japanese curry. I typically think curry, I think, Southern Asia. Um, you know, India, Thailand, Vietnam. I don't think Japan. Well, I was wrong because this was pretty tasty. So it's very simple ingredient list. Basically, it is beef, curry powder, onions. There's some ginger in it. There's russet potatoes, chicken broth, which again surprised me a little bit because usually I think of a beef dish, I don't think putting chicken broth. I usually think beef broth or water, wine, something like that. He's got it specifically listed as Madras curry powder, which is basically your store yellow curry. The Madras version is sometimes a little bit spicier. Um, it's not really a blend that's used much in India itself. It was kind of developed for the British market for export, but it's used a lot of places now, and it's a premixed blend. It's pretty easy to find. The one that I've been using is from Penzies. Um, I use their sweet curry. I like it a lot. You can mail order it. There's actually a store down in, I think it's in Berkeley, maybe Beverly Hills, down
Beverly
around,
Hills.
yeah, down around
Yeah.
13 Mile. If you're into spices, check the place out because it's really pretty neat, and I love that sweet curry. I use it in a bunch of things. Um, so again, touching back on the beef curry, it is served over rice. Um, and the picture in the book is a little bit deceptive because when it shows it, uh, it does not look as brothy as it is, and the reason for that is because there's a bed of rice underneath it, and all the liquid goes down to the bottom. Um, that being said, it's delicious. I really like this one. Couple of things that I should mention. I am traditionally terrible about following recipes really closely. I tried to be really good about following this one, and I did for the most part. One thing that I did do, I dialed back the amount of broth a little bit because it calls for a full quart of chicken stock. I used about 3 cups,
Mm.
and it was still pretty brothy. It worked out really well. I liked it. I don't think you need to go with the full 4 cups. You can probably get away with maybe as little as two, um, especially if you're not going crazy with the rice because the rice soaks a lot of that up. Um, Now, the recipe does call for hanger steak, which I suppose that if you do most of your shopping at a full blown butcher shop, you can probably find relatively easily. I've heard of it before. I've never seen it offered for sale in a supermarket. You walk into your average Kroger and ask them for hanger steak, you're going to get a funny look. I used beef chuck, which worked out really well. It worked great for braises because it needs to be cooked for a while to really get nice and tender. But it worked out very well. I had to do a little bit of trimming on it to get some of the fat out of it, but otherwise, I was very pleased with it. The cook time on this is close to 2 hours. The prep work is not complicated, and the initial setup isn't, but it does need to cook on low heat for a while in order for that beef to tenderize. The recipe calls for adding the potatoes fairly early in the process and then cooking them for a long time. And if you've ever cooked russet potatoes um, in a wet uh, broth for a long period of time, you will know that they disintegrate pretty easily.
I was going to ask if they thicken it up for you.
Yeah,
Nice.
well, they would have
Well-
definitely thickened it up quite a bit if I had done that, but I waited until about a half hour before the end of the cook time. I gave it a good hour before I added the potatoes, and they still were very thoroughly cooked, but they did not disintegrate at that time.
We had opposite problems.
Yeah.
My potatoes would not cook in yours.
And it calls for about 3 tablespoons of oil. I did find that to be a little bit more than it really needed. I probably could have dialed that back down to about 2 tablespoons just to brown the meat. And again, hanger steak may be a leaner cut. I've never really worked with it. Chuck does have a tendency to have a fair amount of fat in it, so it is not a super lean cut. That may have made a difference. I was very pleased with the way it turned out. It looked pretty much just exactly like the picture in the book. It was garnished with a little bit of fresh lemon. I tried it without the lemon. I tried it with the lemon. You know what? The lemon makes a difference. It's good that way.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell me a little bit about your overall impressions of the book? Would you recommend it to anybody?
Yeah, my takeaways. I would recommend this book, definitely. I would say, like I said before, there's a lot of plant-based cooking books coming out these days, and I think a lot of them are now assuming a base knowledge of plant-based ingredients and cooking techniques, and this is no exception. She does talk quite a lot in the beginning about ingredients she recommends and ingredients that make cooking African inspired. We mentioned the spices, but then she also talks about different vegetables and different specialty ingredients that you can use to make it feel a little bit more authentic. But I would say if you are very, very much a beginner, you might want to read up on some of the cooking techniques. But again, none of them are particularly complicated. And I think that the idea is to make these recipes as approachable as possible, especially since a lot of people are interested in exploring more types of vegan cooking. So, flipping through, I said initially that I had a hard time choosing a recipe to do. I'll name a few of the other ones that caught my eye, but didn't make the final cut for what I would make for this segment. But I definitely plan to revisit. So the book is divided into parts of the meal. Basically, I liked the organization of yours. Sometimes I think I don't want to stand over a stove, so what can I put in the oven instead and walk away? That kind of thing. How do I want to cook?
Absolutely.
This one is more what do I want to cook? So it starts out with basic sauces and chutneys. Then it goes into snacks and starters, main dishes. There's a section just for rice, desserts, and drinks. And then at the end, there is a list of menus for different occasions. So, say, like, I want to do a romantic dinner or something for the kids or like a picnic, for example. Those are, she'll have lists of recipes from the book that would be good for those different occasions. So, some of the recipes that I am interested in revisiting. In the snack section, there's a sweet potato and ginger loaf. So, like a sweet potato, like quick bread, but it's mostly sweet potatoes, not a ton of sugar, and it's gluten free, which we have some gluten free folks around here. So I always like to try to make things that can be shared. That one I'm curious about. That's actually what I originally bought the sweet potatoes for, but then I pivoted, so we might just get a taste of that later on. I looked at, for starters, anything with cauliflower. I'm a big fan of. There was a roasted cauliflower with peanut ginger sauce, which,
Mhm.
if it's roasted and it's cauliflower, I'm on board. For main dishes, there was a plantain and eggplant stew that might be good for warmer weather when eggplant is easier to get a hold of. So I might try that later in the year. And I looked at, oh, for drinks, there's a spiced hot chocolate that is made with rice milk. And I know you were talking about before, we were having a conversation about hot chocolate, and you were saying you like it made with something maybe not so heavy. You make it with water, don't
I know
you?
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
So,
fiddled around with it, a
mhm.
number of different ways, but it's for me, it's not always the sweet, creamy beverage that
Yes,
one thinks of
something
when
a
you've
little more
gotten back,
bracing.
off a sledding slope or
Yeah.
something.
Well, this has I've just all I want to do is be cozy right now.
Hmm.
It's the dead of winter, so spiced hot chocolate. It has rice milk, dark chocolate, a little coconut sugar, a little allspice, and then coconut milk to give it a little bit of richness. So this just sounds really good. And
Okay.
I like chocolate and spices together. I know that's not always everyone's favorite, but I've always liked the combination. So I'll
Okay.
probably be making this one too.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
So, what are your takeaways from Simply Ming One Pot Meals?
Okay. Well, some of the things I really liked about this book were not only the way it was organized, but one of the things I look for in a cookbook is not just the recipes. Um, I do definitely take a look at those and how they're organized and how they're put together, but this thing here has an overall, kind of point to it. Um, he definitely is working with simple techniques, uh, trying to do things relatively quickly. I mean, obviously, a braise takes a while, but it's not something you have to, slave over for hours and hours and hours. He's aiming for stuff that's healthy and pretty affordable. Now, this particular book focuses on full meals for about four people, and it will tell you that he's trying to do these things for about 20 bucks a crack. Well, this book is also a good 15 years old at this point. Prices have changed, and while some of the chicken and pork based stuff you may still be able to do for 20 bucks, uh, some of this stuff is going to make a big difference where you live and where you're shopping, because I believe that he's based out of the Boston area, so he's got really good access to fresh seafood. Um, this thing here has got several different meat bases. It uses seafood on a number of things. It's also got completely vegetarian dishes in it, and some of them are really quite interesting. And I'm not a vegetarian, but there's a vegetarian hot and sour soup in here that sounds really good. I haven't tried it yet. Um, there are a few ingredients in here that are going to be a little bit tricky to find at your average supermarket. They are typically available somewhere in the metro area, but you're probably either going to have to go to a specialty store or mail order some things. Um, One in particular is fermented black beans, which he uses in a lot of different recipes, and this is definitely something that is used in Chinese cuisine fairly regularly. But I don't think I've ever seen them in a mainline grocery store. And even today, when you can get a lot of more interesting and ingredients that you didn't see in grocery stores 20 years ago, that's one I still don't usually see. You're probably going to have to go to an Asian market for something like that. 168 down in Madison Heights has got everything you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine. H Mart's probably worth taking a look at over in Troy, too. Um, Another one that he uses repeatedly in here that's a little tricky to find in the area is Thai basil. Now, you can certainly use regular, fresh basil for a lot of things. It's not going to have quite the same flavor to it. There's an anise note that you get out of Thai basil that just doesn't exist in your sweet Italian basil. Um, if you're looking for fresh Thai basil, the only place I've been able to get it consistently around here has been Nino Savaggio, and a lot of times you got to be there on the right day because they only get it certain days of the week, and it doesn't last very long. It goes pretty quick.
So, make friends with the greengrocer is what you're saying.
Never be afraid to stop somebody in the produce section and,
Yeah.
hey, do you have this? Yes, no, okay. Do you ever get it? Yes, okay, great. When?
Here's my number. Text
Yeah.
me.
Well, that's not going to probably
No.
happen, but at the same time, it never hurts to ask questions. So, yeah. Um, Now, some of the seafood stuff in here, we can get, seafood here in the Midwest, but it is definitely not as that you're not going to get the price or the freshness that you're going to get if you live in a coastal city like Boston. And even 20 years ago, I can tell you that halibut to feed 4 people was more than $20, at least around here. And
Unless
there
you're
is
doing
definitely
those.
a halibut recipe in here. There's a couple of scallop recipes too. Some of this stuff is going to definitely be pricier than one might expect, but you know, you just gotta realize that things are more expensive than they were in the past.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard when you do an affordable cookbook, but then it's 15 years
And then
later,
the game
the economy
changes.
is different now. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm sure that, like you said, even with the hanger steak, it's like there are charts online where you can um, see what the best substitutions might be for different fish and
yeah,
different meats. So you could always take a look at those and see like, oh, I don't have this fish I can't find, but here are 3 others
yeah,
that will perform similarly in a recipe. You could give those a try instead.
yeah, yeah. If you're looking for relatively inexpensive cuts of beef, relatively, because let's face it, even ground beef is pretty much more expensive than it was a few years ago. Chuck is a good bet. That's usually going to involve some longer cooking times. Top sirloin is reasonably priced and pretty good stuff. Um, Top round is often a good bet. It's pretty lean, does have a tendency to not have a ton of fat in it. Um, Bottom round, you're going to want to watch real close because bottom round is tends to be dry and it's got a lot of connective tissue in it. It's
Gross.
pretty chewy. Not one you necessarily want to default to right away.
Well, mine just has beans in it, so if it looked like a bean, it's probably fine. Not to oversimplify, but yes.
um, okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, this has been Cookbook Corner. Thanks so much for attending our little conversation. And we release a new one on the first Thursday of every month. So join us next time.
yeah, we're going to give this a shot for a little while and
Yep.
see how it goes.
And if you try any of our cookbooks and try any recipes at home, let us know. Come talk to us. We promise to try not to talk your ear off about cooking. But
These books are available here at the library. This is stuff we have on the shelf.
yep, and we have so much more. So definitely check it out.